Okay, so welcome everybody to our September edition of our CNCF, our Eastern Canadian CNCF Meetup. It's really wonderful to have you all here. My name is Julia. I am one of your co-hosts today. So we're going to get started quite promptly because we have quite a bit that we want to do and we want to try to keep it in the hour as opposed to going over. So we will get started. Hey, Daniel. Happy to see everybody. So our agenda for today is going to be great. We're going to do a little intro as we usually do. We're actually going to give you our sneak peek suggestions for KubeCon that is coming up October 11 to 15. So really excited about that. And then we're going to have one talk from Dewan talking about deploying applications using ApplicationSet. And we're going to have a little update from Henrik around the Argo CD roadmap. And then in usual fashion, we will do a little draw at the end of all of this so you can win some awesome swag. So we are four today that have kind of organized and are running this meetup. So the wonderful Jason, Jen, Sebastien, and myself are all here to support and have different parts in this. So if there's any questions that come up as in usual form, put it in the chat, be active in the chat. We will also enable a Q&A and we'll be able to have that for our speakers. And of course, we would never forget to mention all our wonderful other committee members. So we are many now and our beautiful family has grown. So shout out to all of the folks on our committee. We, as you probably noticed, we take turns in doing this and hosting and running these events. So thank you all for your time and contributions to this community. And to our sponsors. So right now, those are Elastic and JFrog. Big shout out to them who are not only providing great content for us, but also support for other events and hopefully soon, fingers crossed. We were kind of looking for a fall return to in-person, but I think it'll have to wait a little bit. But we are looking forward to seeing you all soon. So as mentioned, we have some great talks today. So our team will give you a little bit of that. And then we have Dewan Ahmed from Red Hat, who's going to be doing the main talk today, as well as Henrik Blixt, hopefully I pronounced that properly, who will give us a little insight into what is happening in the Argo CD ecosystem and what's coming up next for that project. And some basic housekeeping, as we always do. We are fairly active on social media, so please join us if you're a fan of LinkedIn. We have a group there called Cloud Native Canada, and you can just request to join the group and one of us will let you in there. We're also on Twitter at Cloud Native CA. And this is the QR code for joining our Kubernetes Slack channel. So we have a Kubernetes Canada Slack channel, and we created that a few years ago just to have a little bit less noise than what's in the main Kubernetes Slack channel. So if you'd like to join, please do so. It's great to have you in there. There's always some great sharing and discussions happening in those threads. And we would love to have other people speaking at our meetup. So actually, Dewan, you were you're going to be our poster child for this process. Dewan actually submitted a talk through these wonderful links, and we saw his CFP, and we thought it was awesome. And here he is today, joining us for a chat. So if you do have either a tech talk that you'd like to do about a certain technology that you'd like to present and or a user story. So successes, failures, whatever along the way of your journey using a CNCF project, please submit them here. We definitely, as much as we love our sponsors and we love the content they provide, we also want to hear from the folks in the community. So please don't be shy to submit talks. And if you need any help or guidance, reach out to us and we can provide that for you. And I'll pass it to Jen now.
Thanks, Julia. So just a couple of announcements. Reminder that the part 2 of the 2021 CNCF survey is out there and focusing on, cloud containers and some of the other tool sets, right? Chance to win on a virtual pass to KubeCon and Cloud Native, and due on September 30th. That QR code is fantastic, and you just use that and it will take you to the link. And then obviously KubeCon and Cloud Native. CA, sorry, October, and we have a Slack channel in the Kubernetes Canada Slack channel, so the KubeCon North America 2021 hybrid, join us there. KubeCon being both virtual and in person, and you'll notice at the bottom there is a 20% discount for CNCF Canada community members, and the code is there for everyone to use. And then we put together a couple of talks that are really exciting for us during KubeCon and CloudNativeCon. First one there being customize. That one looks super interesting, talking about extending the custom resources for Customize around some client-side work with Katrina and Jeff, and then our very own Julia's talk will tell about burnout. I'm super excited about that one. And then also a very lovely talk from Liz Rice around eBPF and some of the tool sets there. And we've also got another one there around Here services. So that one being around multi-cluster services and so using the multi-cluster API. And so we're all excited about these talks. Hopefully it inspires folks. And now I will pass it on. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia and Jen. I'll start by sharing my screen. I think I'll need to be host. Okay, that's good. In a second, you'll be all seeing yourself, but that will change when I go full screen. All right, so I hope you can see my slides now. The good news is there's not too many slides today. We'll focus on the demos mostly. So I'm Dewan Ahmed, developer advocate at Red Hat. I lived in Toronto for 10 years before moving to the beautiful New Brunswick, Atlantic region of Canada. Right now I'm traveling. That's why actually I'm back at my home city, Toronto, where I'm joining you from. I love everything cloud native with a focus on DevOps and GitOps tools. And besides work, I love to play pool, ping pong, and I'm also a freelance career coach where I help students and new grads to start their career in the tech industry. So if you meet me at a conference and if there's a pool hall nearby, please let me know and we'll go for a few games of 8-ball. In terms of today's agenda, we'll cover like what is GitOps, a quick background of Argo CD. The original talk focused more on ApplicationSet, but this talk will cover both Argo CD and ApplicationSet, which is a sub-project of Argo CD. Both of these theories or slides will accompany with demos. We'll have some time, hopefully, for Q&A, and I'll share some resources. So at the bottom right corner of the screen, you can see a link to a GitHub repository. And if you're joining us from a mobile device, you can scan the QR code as well, which will take you go out of the screen, full screen, just to show you. You don't need to read what's in there, just to show you like what is the repository so that you're familiar with. So the demo which I'll be showing is based on OpenShift, but this repository uses vanilla Kubernetes. So if you're following this on your own at a later time, this is purely based on vanilla Kubernetes. You can follow this, and you just need a Kubernetes cluster. Let's say you're trying to follow that, and if you have any question, I also added my LinkedIn and Twitter handle in the slides, so you can reach out to me, or you can also reach out to reach out via the Argo CD CNCF Argo CD Slack channel, where there'll be more experts to answer your questions. What I do in my every talk is, since I'm not the expert, I don't have the answer to all the questions. So let's say you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I'll take it as a takeaway question. I'll put it under the FAQ section so that it's the same link. All you have to do is just come back to the link maybe after a few days, and I'll try to add the question in this list. Under the resources section, I try to add all the resources that I think would help you to start your journey with GitOps. And here's the Argo CD and ApplicationSet GitHub and the docs as well. All right, so let's go back to the presentation.
Dewan, I just have a question. Will you be sharing these slides afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll export these slides as a PDF, and I'll send over to you by email after the talk, if that's okay.
Yep, perfect, cool. We just had a question in the chat about it, so I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Yes, please. And during the talk, if you have any question, please feel free to interrupt me and ask the question. Also, towards the end, if you have time, we can go over the Q&A session. But yeah, please do, if because I'm full screen, I can't see the question. So thank you, Julia, for passing me the question. All right. So what is GitOps? The most popular question. So this is not my own slide. This is this was from Luis Facira. So he summarized GitOps in one slide, and I kind of copied that because I absolutely love this summarize of GitOps in one slide. So the principle is we use Git as the single source of truth for a system. So not our Kubernetes cluster, not some server. So using Git as the single source of truth. We use Git as the single place where we operate. That means if you want to make any changes to your cluster, we do it via Git, and then you see the reflection on the cluster rather than making change directly on the cluster. And finally, all the changes are also observable and verifiable. So let's say if your team makes any changes and you suddenly think that, hey, who deleted my ingress? So there's a way to track that. So that's in GitOps principles in one slide. On a lighter note, who came up with the term GitOps? So it's Alexis Richardson. And a fun fact is when he ran the term by his friend thought it's the ugliest term he has ever heard. And now he can't unhear it. So Alex is trying to think of a term which is easy to pronounce, but also difficult to forget. He knew that he found the perfect term. So hence GitOps. And again, just some shameless plug, LinkedIn and Twitter at the bottom of the screen. So please feel free to connect over there. All right, so what is the GitOps on Kubernetes bill of materials? So of course, we need the Git repositories. We need Kubernetes cluster or clusters for deploying our application. The optional part, a manifest generation tool. So for example, if you have different environments like dev, pre-prod, prod, you can use a tool like Customize. You also will need a CI tool. So under the resources sections, I added a link that says why CI ops is an anti-pattern. So your CI server should not do direct update to application deployment. So I'm not going to go too much detail into that, but the blog I added in the resources section will go much more into detail. And finally, you need a way to group your Kubernetes resources. For example, your deployment, your services, those manifest files. So thinking of that, introducing Argo CD. Argo CD is a CNCF incubating project, which is right here. And the talk will focus on Argo CD and a sub-project application set. So this is the famous landscape. I'm not going too much deep into the landscape because the whole view always scares me. So I'm just focusing on the Argo CD piece right here. So the picture is pretty simple intentionally. It just shows Argo CD is sitting in the middle. It watches over the Git repository for any changes, and it reacts to that change on your Kubernetes cluster or clusters. Now, why Argo CD? So the first 3 points are like it was similar to what we saw in the GitOps principle in GitOps in one slide. We use Git as the single source of truth. It being developer centric. That means you don't need to do kubectl command. Your team of developers are familiar with Git push, Git-based workflows. So they're using those workflows rather than doing kubectl commands. The declarative, so Kubernetes API server accepts declaration as an input and continuously tries to drive the cluster into the state declared in that declaration YAML. And in terms of security, compliance, and auditing, so let's talk about authentication. So Argo CD offers SSO based on OIDC and OAuth 2. Also, a lot of social logins, for example, your GitHub or LinkedIn. In terms of authorization, Argo CD offers multi-tenancy and RBAC authorization, and it also offers you audit trails for your application and API calls. Argo CD trivializes rollback. That means your rollback or roll to anywhere is just a git commit. So if you have your application configuration code, you can roll back to any commit in your Git repository. Argo CD appdiff, the command from CLI or from the UI, will show you the difference. That means your desired state versus the live state. So you can observe the change both using the CLI or the UI. And finally, considering all this, your developer team will have a higher velocity in terms of deploying your applications. Now let's see how Argo CD works. So on the left side, we have our developer persona who does a PR merge, and Argo CD knows about that event in form of a webhook event. And the blue rectangle where I'm hovering my mouse, you can think that of an Argo CD. The Argo CD API server is a gRPC REST server, which exposes the API to the UI, Argo CD UI. It has a pretty nice UI, which we'll show during the demo, the CLI, or different CI/CD system. There's a repository service, which holds a local cache of the Git repository for the application manifest. And of course, Argo CD is implemented as a Kubernetes controller. There are various sync hooks or resource hooks. And what these sync hooks do is they could run before, during, or after a sync operation. In terms of sync, let's say your Argo CD is watching over your application, and then it sees a difference between what you desired in your Git repository and what's in the cluster. Your application will be called then out of sync. And then you need to either automatically or manually sync the application to see the reflection of what's in the Git repository. So let's say if you have a more complex deployment, you can run these sync hooks where you'll run some scripts before, during, or after the sync operation. And finally, at the bottom right corner of the screen, it shows that you can deploy to one or more clusters. All right, so as I said, I'll try to keep it very minimal with the slides, and let's start with the Argo CD demo. So for this demo, I'm using OpenShift and OpenShift GitOps, but if you're following along this repository, this is based purely on open source Argo CD and vanilla Kubernetes. So the first step which I did was I installed OpenShift GitOps operator on my OpenShift cluster. This packs Argo CD and ApplicationSet. It's a cluster-wide operator, and I'm showing in the demo the same thing on where you can follow along if you have a Kubernetes cluster instead of an OpenShift cluster. So once we install this operator, the operator creates OpenShift project, which is similar to Kubernetes namespace called OpenShift-GitOps. So from this point onward, whenever you see OpenShift-GitOps, OpenShift project or Kubernetes namespace, this is similar to what open source Argo CD does with Argo CD namespace. So when you install, like you create an Argo CD namespace and you install Argo CD in that namespace, if you're using open source Argo CD, OpenShift-GitOps would be that namespace for OpenShift. So we have an instance of Argo CD out of the box, and I'm just using admin, and I could copy the password. Let me show you one more time, which is under OpenShift GitOps namespace, and OpenShift-GitOps-cluster is the default admin password. But of course, once you log in, you can change the password from CLI, and you can also, I believe, you can disable the default password. So Argo CD has option of has a concept called projects. Now this is different from OpenShift project. This is Argo CD project, where you can group your application. There are repositories. So for today's demo, I'm using a public repository, so I didn't have to connect in advance. But let's say if you're using a private repository, you could connect in advance. So these are the simple. This is the simple app, customized based app, which I'll deploy. It has a deployment file, a service file, and a route file, which we'll talk more in details. So I'm creating an application using the Openshift Console. I could create the application using the Argo CD Console or the CLI as well. So yeah, you have multiple options there, or you could do OC apply on the YAML as well. So I'm choosing the Openshift Console view to create this application. I'm adding the name of the application. The destination would be the destination cluster. So I have only one cluster where I have installed Argo CD. So it's the Kubernetes default service. And namespace is the namespace. So remember, I mentioned that OpenShift GitOps would be the namespace because that's where our, Argo CD is installed. But you can also choose a different namespace. And I think later in the demo, I'll show you how you need to create the namespace in order to do that. Project is Argo CD project. So if I go here under projects, so we have only the default projects. So for this demo, I didn't create a separate project. I'm just using the default project. Repo URL, the GitHub repository URL, which I copied, and customize Nginx OpenShift. If you see on the screen, like that is the path where my manifest files are. Not making any other changes. If I go to sync policy, you can do either automated sync policy or you can do manual sync policy. Automated sync policy means as soon as Argo CD senses a change in your Git repository, it will sync your application automatically. Manual sync means you have to click the sync button or you have to add the command from CLI in order to sync the application. So we'll use the manual sync for now. And that's why you see the application is out of sync. We have to manually sync the application. So you can see that the prod dash was the prefix that I added in my customization file. And that's why it has that prod dash. On line number 1, the name prefix prod dash. So that was added. That's nice. And I have my service deployment and route. So route is similar to Kubernetes ingress, OpenShift specific CRD. So I'll click on synchronize and the app should be synced. Synced means its desired state is same as the target state. And I have only one pod. That's because in my deployment file, I had number of replicas as 1 on line number 6. So let me try to make a change. So this is the GitOps way where I'll make a change in my repository rather than doing a kubectl scale deployment. So as soon as I made change, let's say if I refresh, so right now the app is still synced. Refresh, the app will be out of sync because it sees that number of replicas in the cluster is 1, but in the Git repository, we can see the diff as well. And you can see the same thing using CLI as well. So number of replicas is 1, desired 3. So of course, Argo CD is not happy. It wants to be in sync with what we described in our Git repository. So to make Argo CD happy, we just click on sync. And you should see on the right-hand side of your screen the number of pod. There you go. So it goes to 3. And if you had auto sync enabled, I think that demo is coming up. You don't have to like manually click on sync every time. All right, so you can delete the application again using CLI, Argo CD UI, or OpenShift Console. So we deleted the application. Now let's create the same application one more time, but we'll showcase the auto sync option. Destination cluster is still the same, where we have Argo CD installed. OpenShift GitOps is the namespace. This is Argo CD project, which is default. We're using the same repository URL and the same path where our manifest files are. But this time, under sync policy, we'll go to automated and we'll choose prune and sell fields. So what prune means is if you delete a resource from your Git repository, Argo CD will delete the resource on the cluster if you have that option checked. And self heal means that if I make change directly on the cluster, Argo CD will prevent that change from happening. That means my Argo CD application will not go out of sync. If I didn't have that checked, Argo CD application will go out of sync, and you again have to sync in order to have both states matched. All right, so application is created. So if I go back to my application, Argo CD console, now you can observe that I didn't have to manually click on sync. As soon as the application was created, it was in sync. And I'm expecting that the number of pod would be 3 because the number of replicas are 3. So that's the auto sync. So I'm connecting to the cluster from CLI. And I'm switching to, well, I'm already on OpenShift GitOps project. And if I do OC get service, so you can see the services. So there's a prod nginx. So I'll delete that service. This is to show you the self-heal feature. So let's say someone getting adventurous and they're trying to delete a resource directly on the cluster rather than doing through the GitOps flow. So the resource was deleted, but if you observe, the app never goes out of sync. That's because we have the self-heal enabled. So if I do refresh, I still see that my prod nginx service is right there. So in order to delete the application, the Argo CD application, you can delete using the CLI, or you can delete from either the OpenShift console or the Argo CD UI. And that will delete all the resources that was created when the application was created. Okay, so that was the demo of Argo CD, where we created a single application from a single Git repository. So that's all nice and well, but what if you want to create multiple Argo CD applications targeting multiple Kubernetes cluster or namespace? Or what if you want to deploy Argo CD application from a monorepo where you have one Git repository, but multiple folders within that repository represent one application? For that, you need to create multiple Argo CD application. And you can imagine if you have hundreds of cluster, how cumbersome or how difficult that would be. So introducing Argo CD Application Set. So Application Set is a sub-project of Argo CD. Unlike Argo CD application resource, which deploys resource from a single Git repository to a single destination cluster or namespace, Application Set uses templated automation to create or manage multiple Argo CD applications targeting multiple cluster or namespace. The application set controller is installed alongside Argo CD within the same Argo CD namespace in terms of open source Argo CD or OpenShift GitOps namespace for OpenShift. And this creates a new custom resource called application set. So if you see on the right-hand side on the YAML, line number 2, application set custom resource. So in this example, we're using list generator, and generators provide the option to create different templates and based on your requirements. So for this example, we're using list generator, but there are also different types of generators. The list generator, what it does is you can have multiple clusters. So line number 10, 11 to 16 under elements. So we have multiple clusters defined, and line number 17 and downwards, the template piece would look like an Argo CD application, which is it's just a templated Argo CD application. So here you can see that three Argo CD application would be created, each for the cluster, because the value cluster and URL are injected from this list elements. The sole responsibility of application set controller is to create and manage application resources in Argo CD namespace or OpenShift GitOps namespace in terms of OpenShift. The controller's only job is to ensure that application resources remain consistent with the defined declarative application set resource. So if you think of the responsibility of our application set versus Argo CD application, the application set controller actually doesn't create or modify Kubernetes resources, for example, deployment services, etc. Application set allows Argo CD to do all the heavy lifting. Application set also does not connect to your Kubernetes or OpenShift clusters. In order to use application set and let's say the generators that target multiple cluster, those clusters have to be defined within Argo CD beforehand. So Argo CD connects to those clusters. And finally, in terms of namespace, application set controller is limited within the same namespace where Argo CD is deployed within. So Argo CD for open source and OpenShift GitOps for OpenShift GitOps. So you can think of application set controller as an application factory, which takes application set CRD as an input, and it outputs one or more Argo CD application. So these are the different types of generators. So list generator, cluster generator, and Git generator were I guess the original generators that was with the first release of application set. And in a recent release, the other types of generators were added. In today's demo, I'll go over the list generator and Git generator directory, but you can also see the matrix generator in the Git repository, which I've added. So let me show you how one of these generators read the doc looks. So if you want to learn more about these generators, you can go here in application set, read the docs. And my colleagues who worked on this project did an amazing job in adding the docs for these generators. All right, I think we have, again, enough of a theory and time for some application set controller demo. Right. So here, what we're trying to do is deploying a single application to multiple clusters. The demo focuses on 2 clusters, but we can target n number of clusters, as the title of the talk says. So if I go into my application set custom resource definition, so the type is application set, and I'll be uncommenting the engineering prod in a bit. So I'm using the same repo URL, which I used in the Argo CD example. So targeting new cluster is just a matter of adding new list elements here. But these cluster would already have to be connected in your Argo CD. So you can't do it using the UI yet, as far as I know. You have to do Argo CD cluster add to add different remote clusters. So the template automation means that your cluster and URLs are injected here dynamically. I'm using a sync option for created namespace true. That means like if the namespace doesn't exist already, I'd like that namespace to be created. So again, you can create application set using CLI. You can just do an OC apply on the custom resource. If you're using OpenShift, you can do it from the OpenShift console as well. So I'm going to the OpenShift UI. Again, choosing the default admin username and password. And the secret is OpenShift GitOps cluster. So here under clusters, you see I don't have any cluster yet. It's just the same cluster where Argo CD is installed. I'll try to connect to the remote cluster now. Argo CD is pretty picky on how you format the URL. So this is what I did from the UI. The same thing I'm connecting from the CLI. So once I'm logged into Argo CD, then I'll have to connect to my OpenShift or Kubernetes cluster so that I have the context. I'm using a tool called KubeCDX. It's a pretty handy tool to quickly switch context between multiple Kubernetes clusters. If you haven't used that, you can use it. It's a pretty handy tool, KubeCDX. So I have the context. So this is my remote cluster, which I don't have it yet under my Argo CD UI. So I'll do Argo CD cluster add, and then the context name. It creates a service account, a cluster role, and cluster role binding on the remote cluster so that Argo CD can create and manage resources on that cluster. So once I have that, I can switch back to Argo CD UI and see the cluster being added there. And now that I have added the cluster, I'll add the remote cluster URL in that in this engineering prod element. So I'm creating an application set custom resource from the Openshift Console. You can either fill up using the form view, or I'll choose the YAML view now. So if you observe, the namespace where I'm deploying the resource is different from OpenShift GitOps, or if you're using Argo CD. Since it's different namespace, I'll have to use a special label called managed by OpenShift GitOps so that OpenShift GitOps controller or the Argo CD controller can have access to that namespace. And this is specific for OpenShift. If you're using open source Argo CD, you don't have to consider that. So here you can see that my remote cluster is added. And I'm updating my engineering prod. It's just a name, engineering dev and prod. That cluster name could be any name you give. So I can see that my application set resource was created, and using a single custom resource, I have two Argo CD applications. Again, the number 2 could be n, just based on the list elements on your Argo application set CR. So let's try to delete an Argo CD application. So previously, you saw that when we created an Argo CD application purely using Argo CD, we could delete that application. But since these two applications were created using application set custom resource, if I try to delete this application directly on the cluster, application set controller will just recreate this application This can happen, let's say, if someone tries to delete the application by mistake. If your apps were created using ApplicationSet controller, that catastrophe would be prevented. In order to delete the resource, we'll have to delete from the console or from the CLI, deleting that custom resource. So that was the list generator example. The next example is Git generator directory. So the first example, we have a single repository. We're targeting n number of cluster. The second example is more like a monorepo. We have a single repository, but multiple applications within that repository targeting a single cluster. So it's the same application, although it says guestbook. I'm actually using an Nginx application. I'm mimicking 3 different applications using different name. So again, since I'm using different namespaces, I have to use this label that's called managed by Openshift GitOps, so that Argo CD or Openshift GitOps controller has access to this namespace. So for these 3 applications, I had to create these namespaces in advance. And if you're deploying your application into a different namespace than Argo CD, you probably would have the namespaces created already. So this is the Git directory example. And if you see that path.base name, that is dynamically injected. This would come from the path example Git generator directory guestbook example apps /star. And then in that path, we have 3 applications, 3 folders representing 3 applications, guestbook Helm, guestbook JSONet, and guestbook Customize. I didn't have auto sync enabled. That's why I have to manually sync these 3 applications. And once that happened, I think that JSONet would take a little while, but then all 3 applications would be in sync. All right, so there we go. So all 3 applications are now in sync. And similar to the previous demo, if you try to delete an application directly from the cluster, ApplicationSet controller will just recreate it. And I have the matrix generator in this GitHub repository. I'm not showing it in the demo, but for matrix generator, you can, the use case for matrix generator would be if you had, let me open up the matrix generator right here. So matrix generator is mixing and matches different generators. So for example, if you have a list generator targeting multiple clusters, but you have also a monorepo, so multiple applications within a single repository targeting multiple cluster, you can mix and match using matrix generator. And that's in this demo right here. All right, so I'll go back to the slides. So to summarize, what we learned today is the concept of GitOps and why we need to consider that for application deployment on Kubernetes. We introduced an open source tool called Argo CD and how Argo CD can help your GitOps journey. Then we raised some questions that what if we want to target multiple clusters or a monorepo? And that's where we talked about Argo CD Application Set, a sub-project of Argo CD, which will help you targeting multiple clusters or from monorepo using a single application set custom resource. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, ask on Slack, connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, or even ask on the public Argo CD Slack on CNCF. Thank you for your time today.
Awesome talk, Dewan. Thank you so much. So folks, just in interest of time, we're going to pick the top 2 questions in the Q&A, and then Dewan maybe will send you the questions and you can maybe answer in text or post the answers in Slack. If you enjoyed that presentation or you have feedback, please sure to rate it in the chat. I'll drop the survey link. This is how you will be able to get access to our draw and provide feedback for ourselves as well as as well as for Dewan. So first question, Dewan, and I think this came in early on in the presentation, but you may have answered it as, have you seen Argo CD and like application sets manage applications deployed in geographically separated clusters?
That's a good question. I haven't seen the exact use case since I didn't see the requirement when we add the application. It's just targeting the cluster, not any limitation on where the cluster is located. My first guess, again, as a guess, would be that shouldn't be a problem. But again, like I have Henrik here, so it gives me more confidence to have his opinion if it varies otherwise. But what I'll do is I'll take away this question and I'll add it under that FAQ section on that Git repository.
Yeah, we haven't rolled it out fully internally yet here at Intuit, but we're planning to use it to manage clusters across various AWS regions.
Right, and so like from the perspective, you should just be able to say wherever the cluster is located, as long as you can reach it geographically, it doesn't matter, as long as you can just reach it from Argo.
Yep.
Cool. Second question here from Olivier. How does GitOps Argo CD tie in with other IAC tools? For example, how would you handle the Terraform scripts to create the kube cluster itself, and maybe other cloud resources such as like database or object storage? Does that, do those repos collide, or do you have a separate Git repo to store that code?
That's a very good question. And my understanding, I think the question comes more like the best practices or use cases. So whereas Terraform would be for your infrastructure, so you're using, and it's also not one versus the other. So where I'm using Terraform for my infrastructure setup, again, using infrastructure as code. Then for managing your application or application deployment, I'm using Argo CD for my Kubernetes application manifests. So they would go hand in hand.
Right. I know there's some projects out there, of course, in the CNCF landscape, but I imagine things like Crossplane that do like CRDs for those play well with Argo, I imagine.
Henrik, would you know about that, Crossplane?
Yeah, there are a number of projects out there, and one of the things that Argo has focused on is being an easily integrated building block, right? So there are a number of other projects that integrate and use Argo. So like Crossplane, there's Backstage, so there are a number of them. So
awesome. Okay, so just a reminder, if you have feedback for the presentations or about the meetup, there's the survey link. It's also in the chat, and this will enter you also for the draw. But now I'd like to turn it over to Henrik. Again, if you have Q&A, we'll try to get those questions answered. But for now, I'd like to get a roadmap update from the Argo CD PM himself.
thank you. And if you stop sharing, hopefully this will. There we go. And hopefully that should show my screen, I hope.
Yep, looking good.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, thanks for having me. So my name is Henrik Blixt. I'm a product manager at Intuit, responsible for platform and open source. And as part of that, one of my main responsibilities is dealing with Argo. So I'm the product manager for our internal usage and engineering on Argo, and also our interface to the community. And I'm one of the Argo maintainers as well. So I wanted to quickly just go through a quick project update of what's going on with Argo, what we're doing, what's coming, and I think I have probably about six minutes to do that, so it'll be pretty quick here. So there are a couple of cool things happening here very soon. I think we've already talked about it, or already mentioned of KubeCon earlier. So Argo will definitely be there in person. There are a number of the maintainers that will be there on site. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us there or grab us. There will be an Intuit booth where there will be maintainers. There will also be a Argo booth in the project pavilion. So there'll be Argo maintainers from various companies manning that booth as well. So feel free to reach out and grab us if you have any questions. There's also a contributor meeting for those of you that are contributing to Argo already or are thinking about it. So on Monday afternoon, like a day -1, there's an in-person event there that will be pretty technical, do some fishbowl sessions, roadmap, integration between the various projects and things like that. So looking forward to that. So if you are at KubeCon in person and you want to get involved with Argo, that would be a good place to show up as well. Even more exciting, to me at least, and I might be slightly biased, is that we actually have an ArgoCon coming up later this year. So in December, unfortunately, it's going to be all virtual with the COVID situation, but we have our first single day ArgoCon. So the CFP is still open for that, I think another couple of days. If you have any sessions you want to submit and you don't have time to do it in the next couple of days, please reach out to me and we'll make sure to get your CFP in. Registration is open. We already have several hundred registrations, so I think this is going to be a really cool event. And did I mention that it's free? So if you want to attend this, go to the link there, register. It's going to be an awesome event as well. Some other things are going on in the Argo community. We're also with all the production usage we've seen. We have several hundred companies using Argo in production. The community is growing. A number of contributors are growing. And we felt it was time to get that graduation approval from CNCF. So we applied a few months ago to be a graduated project. So that process is ongoing. We're hopefully nearing the end. So before the end of the year, the hope is we'll be able to get Argo to a fully graduated project. So that's going to be really exciting, and hopefully that will help some of you that I know that some enterprises are a bit nervous about picking up new projects, but once we have done the graduation, hopefully that will make it easier for some of you to convince management to pick up as well. I also just want to mention that we have a number of Argo community meetings. There are 2 a month, one for Argo CD and rollouts and one for Argo workflows and events. So those are usually really good mix of the maintainers talking about new features and users talking about how they're using Argo. So I really recommend you take part of those and join those or watch them on YouTube if you can't join them live. And then there's also a contributors meeting on every Thursday where it's a little bit more technical, going through issues, helping people to start contributing to Argo. So if you want to pick up and be a contributor to Argo, check out those Thursday meetings as well. And then I think in 2 minutes, I'll go through the roadmap. So we've had a number of releases for the 3 of the 4 projects here in Argo in the last couple of months. So I'll just highlight some of the main features here. So in Argo CD 2.1 that came out here, I think 5 or 6 weeks ago now, one of the really cool features that I'm really excited about is called Argo Core. So Argo, and we saw that earlier, using how we use user management, RBAC, and a lot of nice multi-cluster features available in Argo CD. But in 2.1, we heard that there were a lot of people are asking for a more lightweight Argo CD distribution, maybe just running it locally, maybe looking at doing some edge use cases. So in 2.1, there's a way to install and use Argo Core, as we call it. We basically, instead of shipping all the RBAC and all the control, is basically relying more on Kubernetes to do that. So it's a more lightweight and slimmed down version of Argo. It's easily upgraded or switched to a full Argo, but at least it gives you a much lighter starting point. There's also a lot of time spent on just making it faster and simpler, improving the synchronization processes, reducing the number of Git requests we do, and things like that, just to make it even. I mean, we use it internally for 5,000 developers at Intuit. We have thousands of services and applications running on it, so it can scale pretty good. But you can always make it better and make it easy to use. So there was a good focus on that in 2.1. Looking at 2.2, there are a couple of things that I'm really excited about. We have something called Argo CD extensions. There's been some. We have another project called Argo Rollouts, which helps you do various deployment strategies, advanced deployment strategies. And there's been a number of asks about how to integrate that into Argo CD. So instead of doing a hard integration between them, I want to stick to the Argo idea of doing building blocks. So in 2.2, there's going to be a way to integrate basically any third-party UI into Argo CD and view that there, so you can do a more lightweight integration where there's no Argo rollouts or some other third-party application in there. So it'll be a framework to do that. And then there's something called a timeline view. It will make it easier to bubble up events from Kubernetes and show them on a timeline view to make it easier to troubleshoot, see what's going on with the applications, know whether things are successful or not, and make it easier to correlate issues with what's going on. On the Argo rollout side, we released 1.0 recently. It was the first major release of Argo rollouts. So one of the key things there is the workload referencing. Starting with Argo rollouts is easy. It's been a little bit more tricky to migrate to it because we're moving from a deployment object to a rollouts object. By using this workload referencing, as you might guess, instead of copying and pasting from a deployment spec into the rollout spec, you can now just reference the deployment spec and keep that separate. So that's a really cool way of making it easier to start with rollouts. So also some additions coming in 1.1 here very shortly. Enhancements around how we do traffic routing with experiments, being able to split traffic to the new stack, to your canary, and also down to your old stack. I also just quickly want to mention that we also have Argo workflows. We have 3.1 came out here recently, and a couple of really nice things there around data templates, where some of the data transformation and sourcing are now first-class citizens of Argo workflows. So take a look at that if you're using that. There's also some enhancement around using container sets. Instead of starting a pod for everything, you can now group tasks into containers in the same pod, which will increase the speed and reduce the resource usage of workflow. And then building on that in 3.2 that's coming out here shortly as well, we have something called HTTP template and agents, where you can basically do HTTP calls from an agent. Instead of starting up a pod for each call, we can now kind of group them and aggregate them together and use an agent to do several calls. We'll also make a lot of that faster and easier. And then lastly, one thing that I would have liked to have some feedback on, but I think I'm out of time, is multi-cluster workflows. So Argo workflows is single cluster for now. We have some POCs around using it for multi-cluster workflows, and there has been some varying use cases for that. So if you have any thoughts, and if you are using Argo workflows and you want to use it for multi-cluster, please give me a ping offline, and we'll make sure to take that into consideration. And I think that was it. I'm not sure if you have time for any QA. I can do that on Slack. I have my contact information on here, my email and my Slack. And if anyone is tired of their job and want to work more with Argo, give me a ping, because we have tons of positions open. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Henrik.
So much.
I think I went over with a minute or two, but sorry about that.
You did an awesome timing job. Thank you for that.